how has COVID just impacted your work, and not just in terms of the way you find space to work, but in terms of the work itself? Like, are you finding yourself incorporating any aspects of the last 5 or 6 months into the shit that you're doing
Yeah. Yeah. I watched some other conversations with you, and I know that you're you're looking to see how we've adjusted, right? As writers. Um, I think at first, I've been working on this novel for a long time, and it's like it's really hard. I've been working on this sort of form of fashion for a very long time in my head, and I finally put pen to paper. But when everything happened and everything stopped, I felt like I needed to address it, and I dropped my and I dropped my novel that I've been working on. I started working on something else. I started working on something else that incorporated and addressed what was going on in the world outside, and as well internally, because COVID forced on me a kind of solitude that you're just alone with yourself, and it's comical way to say it is you're like that Spider-Man meme. You're just playing to yourself, but less comically, it's like you're walking through these corridors, and then, it's like you're Bruce Lee, and there's something chasing you, and it's like you're walking through the corridor, all these mirrors, and there's the enemy chasing. You don't know where it is because all you can see is yourself. So I started trying to incorporate, but what I realized was that everything is changing so rapidly. I started writing it, and the cops murdered George Floyd, and then everyone's on the street in a way that we haven't been, and just every single day something new happens, and it was satirical, but the world was outpacing the satire. You get the president telling us to drink bleach, and it's like, how the fuck am I supposed to compete with that?
now?
So what I realized is that I need to observe. The idea, the basic structure, the characters. I think they'll be there. And I think some of the ideas they'll be there, but I need to really sit around and observe. So I went back to my original project, and I'm just working on that slowly. I think a lot of it was trying to escape from a project that was sort of kicking my ass. But then I went to another project that's kicking my ass, and I'm even less prepared for it because I hadn't been working on it.
Is there such a thing as a project that's not kicking your, like, is there an unasked kick project? Does that even exist?
Right. But I wrote through this whole period. The only thing I finished was a short story, and I wrote that, and it kicked my ass, but in a different way, and that it came out. It's a long story, but it came out from beginning to end with, I had to revise it, of course, but it sort of flowed from me. And it was just a pure joy to write, and I haven't really been able to capture that again. Yeah, just like the situation outside, the situation with my writing, it just changes on a daily basis. Right? I don't know. It's just like, some days I wake up and I'm just like, damn, we're still in this shit and I can't write because I'm just, feeling this anxiety, I'm feeling this depression. And contrary to what people who don't have anxiety, don't deal with anxiety and depression, it's not good for your art, right? It's something that I would rather not deal with. So it changes. It's changing on a daily basis. What about you?
What I realize is how much I need other people, and I'm a pretty like severe introvert naturally, and I think, like, if you'd have asked me a year ago or told me a year ago, it's like, you know what, there's going to be a pandemic where you're going to be forced to be in a house, be away from people for months at a time, I would have assumed that, okay, well, at the very least, I'll be able to get a lot of work done. Now we have my wife and my kids are in the house, and I would have to find space away, particularly away from the kids, which my wife, fortunately, helps provide for me in order to work. I thought that, you know what, if I were able to get that space in our house to work, then this sort of situation would be a boon for me. But my writing process requires the outside world. I need to go to the coffee shop and just sit and watch people. One of my favorite places to work was the Ace Hotel in Pittsburgh, where I would just sit at a table. I would eat, I would drink, I would sit there. Sometimes sometimes I'd be there at night, and there would be parties and shit happening and whatever. And this provided like a valuable white noise for me, where I'd be able to sit down and work. And having that removed, and having, and just having to really sit with myself and sit with all this anxiety and all of this neuroses, all these neuroses, all of that, and not be able to observe and not be able to project, and just have to sit with myself, has been very difficult. You know, and it also happens to be a period where I'm getting a lot of opportunities. A lot of opportunities that I have been working for and wanting to get for 5-6 years, and a lot of them are happening like literally right now. But it just happens to be a time when I don't have the bandwidth that I'm used to having, in terms of just being able to create and being able to really, devote the sort of attention and care and rigor to each project that it deserves. And so I'm fearful that whenever this ends, a year from now or whatever, hopefully, and that the work that I'm working on right now sees, it exists in the world, I'm fearful that that work is going to be 80% of what I could do under normal circumstances. 87%, 72%, instead of it being like, oh yeah, this is, like it or not, this was the best that I could have possibly done with this thing. And I'm fearful that I'm not giving these things my best anymore. And that is, that's definitely a COVID related fear. But the thing is, I guess the scale on which best is measured shifts. I think because, maybe I need to give myself more grace, because perhaps the best that I do right now is just the best that I could do. Like I don't judge myself based on 6 months ago, because it's not it's now. And this best is the best. It might not be the 6 months ago best, but maybe a year from now, that best is different than this best. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I don't know. And I'm still trying to make sense of this all.
That makes a lot of sense. I think we have to afford ourselves grace. I think, which I'm not very good at. I think at the beginning everyone was talking about, Shakespeare wrote The Tempest, and I forgot what else, but there were other works that everyone was saying were written during a play, and so we don't have to do that, and what I decided this week, is that I'm just gonna write a sentence every single day, and if I write that sentence, if I write more, that's great, but I just gotta write that sentence. And that's fine. I've there are times, there are two particular stories that I've written, one in my first book and one in a book that's not published, but trust me, it's a great story. The book will never be published, but it's a great story. I wrote word by word, right?
Why
not? It'll be published in a different form eventually. It was gonna be my first book, but the publishing company, never really did anything with it, and then it went under. And so I'm just not comfortable with it. It was written by a different person, and I think I'm gonna go back. It's called Wolf Tickets, and a lot of the stories on it are online. and I'm gonna go back to it one day and totally rewrite it. But I wrote that story, the last story in Wolf Tickets and the last story in my first book. I wrote them word by word. It was, some days I'd just be listing words, and they turned out great because of that. And right now it's like I'm not gonna. If I don't have the bandwidth to sit down and write, and write a thousand words, that's gonna happen again at some point. But I'm just gonna write a sentence, and I wrote a great sentence, on Sunday. I wrote an okay sentence yesterday, two okay sentences yesterday. And that's fine. It's gonna get finished that way. And I'm saying it like this, like I'm saying it, all zen. That's not how I feel inside a lot of times, But it's a lot of times like I only wrote a sentence, fuck. But I think I'm in the process of affording myself a little bit more grace.
Well, that's what that is. That's what that is. Where you almost had to step outside yourself to give yourself, because it exists. Grace exists, functionally as this entity that doesn't exist within you. You have to remove yourself from yourself and give yourself a perspective that you, in the moment, just don't have.
Right.
Because if you had it, then there wouldn't be the need for grace. So it's this, I don't know, it's very just nebulous process where you have to kind of escape yourself and look at yourself and then grant yourself this thing that you wouldn't be able to give yourself unless you had removed yourself from yourself. I feel like I'm talking circles. Right. But that's how it works. Because again, when you're in the moment, when you're in the trenches, when you are dealing with whatever the anxieties and neuroses and self-consciousnesses and vulnerabilities, you just can't give yourself that grace.
Right.
So you have to be almost a separate you to be able to tell yourself, like, hey, yes, you feel this way, you're going through this thing, but you also deserve to be a little bit kinder to yourself right now.
Right.
And it's not just that you deserve it, you require it in order to be able to move forward. So here's this. Right.
I mean, you gotta remember, this is a generational thing. It's like so many people live their entire lives and never experienced this. So of course it's gonna be different. Of course it's gonna throw us off. And what I realize is that when this is over, I just have a lot of I stockpiled ideas. I've stockpiled a lot of stuff that I just sort of feel like at a certain point the dam's gonna burst, and everything's gonna flood. But right now it's got to rebuild. It's like the sports teams when they there's a year where they know they're not going to the playoffs. It's a rebuilding year.
They tank. They start. So you're saying you tanking right now? You tanking for number one draft pick?
Exactly.
Speaking of that, have you been watching the bubble games, the NBA bubble games?
Yo, man, I'm not a sports guy. I know I just use a sports metaphor, but I'm not a sports dude.
Okay.
I follow the news events though, and LeBron's hairline over the years.
Well, with the NBA, it's so fascinating because there are so many storylines outside of what actually happens on the court that happen during a game, and so they just completed a very successful experiment where they went into this bubble at Disney.
At Disney, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. And I thought that it was going to be a disaster. Like I thought, like when they were thinking this up, I thought that it was going to. I felt like the person in the first 15 minutes of the horror movie, where you're riding through like the scenic route and everything looks great, and then you like go to some gas station and there's like some creepy guy in there who just says something really cryptic about the woods you're about to drive through. But the people are like, oh, that's just some weird guy. But I don't care about yeah, we're just going to drive through these woods. And I felt like we were at that point. It's like, holy shit, we're about to drive through these woods. But I have to say, I've been pleasantly surprised that it hasn't been the horror show that I assumed it was going to be. That I figured
even with the hologram fans.
You know what? All of that. So that's just a part of the NBA's just bizarre absurdity. The hologram fans, the Black Lives Matter slogans on a jersey, which is terrible, which is like the worst decision that has ever been made. And I've seen glitter, so I've seen bad decisions, but this is a terrible, awful decision to put like these random slogans. Like some people will have Black Lives Matter, other people's will have economic injustice. There's a white player, Joe Ingles, for the Utah Jazz who has Allah the back of his jersey. I mean, like how absurd and ridiculous is this going to be? But
thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Joe. So that part right there, it's dumb. There's no defending it. But the actual basketball playing,
the gameplay,
and the fact that there hasn't been an outbreak, and that's I guess, and that thing, the fact that there hasn't been an outbreak, and yes, there's a lot of money behind this, and there's a lot of incentive, financial incentive to keep this as sterile as possible. But it just shows that is possible.
There's a way forward, yeah.
And it is possible, even during this pandemic, to slow everything down, to not just flatten the curve, but end it. If you have testing, if you have everyone on the same page, if you have people conscientious enough to think outside of themselves, this can actually happen. We can actually put a stop to this. If I hate being a kumbaya ass nigga. I've never been that person. I think unity for the sake of unity is some fuck shit. There's some bullshit. Like, I don't want to unify with you if you are a person who I would, I don't want to unify with everyone. I don't need.
I'm not holding hands with the Klan.
Yeah. But I think in this instance, a collective unification towards this common enemy would be so simple and wouldn't even need to last that long. We just need to last for 5 or 6 weeks. And America just can't do that.
I saw a headline.
We just aren't built for that.
I saw a headline in Wuhan. They haven't had a case, and they're out in the streets all together again.
They have a pool party. I just saw that they had a pool party.
Right.
and it were the place where supposedly the disease came from.
Right. And it's shameful that we're holed up in our houses.